A diver surfaces from a stormy sea clutching a lump of corroded bronze. That unassuming find, pulled from an ancient shipwreck, would later be called the world's oldest computer. This is the Antikythera Mechanism, an ancient Greek device of staggering complexity that has baffled experts for over a century. By the end of this story, you will understand the secrets of a 2,000-year-old machine that could predict the motion of the cosmos. We will uncover how it was built, who might have used it, and why its very existence rewrites our understanding of history. What does a single artifact tell us about the ambitions of a civilization lost to time? The year was 1900, and the Mediterranean was not in a forgiving mood. Captain Dimitrios Kondos and his crew of sponge divers were returning home to the island of Symi when a fierce spring storm forced their small wooden boats to seek shelter. They anchored near the tiny, rocky island of Antikythera, a place whose name would soon become synonymous with one of history's greatest puzzles. When the seas finally calmed, the captain sent a diver named Elias Stadiotos down to check the seabed for sponges. What he saw in the dim blue light was not a natural reef, but the ghostly silhouette of a ship, and scattered across the ocean floor, half buried in silt, were the marble and bronze limbs of statues, frozen in a silent, watery grave for 2,000 years. Stadiotos surfaced in a panic, babbling about a heap of naked women and horses on the bottom. At first, the crew thought the bends or some deep-sea madness had taken him. But Captain Kondos, a practical man, dove down himself to see. He emerged clutching a bronze arm, confirmation that a fortune in ancient art lay just 45 meters below. This was no ordinary wreck. It was a Roman cargo vessel, a treasure ship that had sunk around 60 B.C., while carrying a vast loot of Greek art and luxury goods from the eastern Mediterranean back to Italy. The divers, with no modern scuba gear, performed breathtakingly dangerous free dives, holding their breath for minutes at a time to bring up priceless statues, delicate glassware, and jars of wine still sealed after millennia. The salvage operation that followed was perilous and primitive. One diver died from the bends, and 2 others were paralyzed for life by decompression sickness, a tragic price paid for archaeology. The recovered treasures caused a sensation, magnificent bronze statues like the Youth of Antikythera and gleaming marble. Yet among these obvious masterpieces, hauled up in nets and baskets, was a far less impressive lump of corroded green bronze and wood, about the size of a large dictionary. It was cracked and fused with marine deposits, its gears locked in a calcified embrace. It was catalogued simply as a piece of corroded clockwork, perhaps an astrolabe or navigational device, and was largely ignored for nearly a year, stored away in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens while scholars marveled at the more beautiful finds. It was only when the crusty lump accidentally cracked apart that a museum archaeologist named Valerios Stais noticed something impossible. Peeking out from the fractured green rock were tiny, precise gear wheels inscribed with minute Greek lettering. In an age believed to possess only simple machines, here was a device of intricate mechanical complexity, older than the teachings of Christianity. It was a ghost in the machine, a secret from the ancient world that had been sitting quietly in a crate, waiting for someone to see it for what it truly was. The most glamorous treasure from the wreck had been admired instantly, but the most important one had to be discovered twice. Those delicate gear wheels presented a profound historical contradiction. For the scholars of the early 20th century, this object was an intellectual impossibility. The prevailing understanding was clear. The ancient Greeks were brilliant philosophers and artists, but their technology was simple. They had water wheels and basic pulleys, not intricate clockwork, so when experts like the British historian derek-de-solla-price first studied the fragments decades later, the device defied all categories. It was covered in finely cut triangular teeth, with dials on the front and back, and plates inscribed with hundreds of tiny Greek characters. everyone's first guess was an astrolabe, a navigational tool for measuring star positions, but this was far too complex. Others thought it must be a clock, but mechanical clocks would not appear in Europe for over 1,000 years after this ship sank. The logical conclusion for many was that it could not possibly be ancient. A compelling theory emerged that it was a medieval or Renaissance instrument, perhaps lost by a later sailor, that had simply tumbled into the older wreck site. It was a convenient explanation, a way to make the timeline fit the technology, but the evidence etched into the bronze itself would not allow that escape. The lettering was unmistakably Hellenistic Greek from the 1st or 2nd century before the Common Era. The astronomical references matched the knowledge of that specific period, not the Middle Ages. The painful, thrilling realization slowly dawned: this machine was not out of place in time. Our understanding of history was out of place. The ancient world had achieved a mechanical sophistication that textbooks had never allowed, and this corroded lump was the only surviving witness. For decades, the mechanism remained a beautiful enigma, a locked box with no key. Then, in the 1950s, a man with a physicist's mind and a historian's soul decided to look inside. His name was derek-de-solla-price. While others had studied the inscriptions on the surface, Price understood that the real secret was in the machine's bones, in the gears themselves. He gained permission to subject the fragile fragments to the most advanced imaging technology of his day, X-rays and later gamma-ray radiography. When the images developed, the ghost in the machine finally began to speak. The photographs revealed a stunning, miniature cosmos of interlocking bronze. Price could now count them, over 30 distinct gear wheels, some with as many as 223 precisely cut triangular teeth, all meshing together in a complex, layered assembly. This was not a simple calendar. This was a machine of profound, deliberate intricacy. Price spent years studying these ghostly images, tracing the relationships between the gears. His groundbreaking conclusion, published in Scientific American in 1974, sent shockwaves through the academic world. He declared the Antikythera Mechanism to be nothing less than an ancient analog computer. Think about that word, computer. We associate it with silicon chips and digital code, but at its heart, a computer is simply a device that processes information according to a set of rules. This bronze machine did exactly that. It was designed to take an input, a date set on a dial, and through a series of precisely calculated gear ratios, produce an output, the predicted positions of the Sun, the Moon, and likely the 5 known planets. It mechanized the complex mathematics of Greek astronomy. Price constructed the first comprehensive model of how he believed it worked. He proposed a hand crank on the side, a single human-powered input that would set the entire celestial model in motion. As you turn the crank, dozens of gears would interact, moving pointers across dials on the front and back to show the Moon's phase, predict eclipses, and even track the irregular orbit of the Moon with a special pin and slot device that accounted for its variable speed. This was a portable simulation of the heavens. Price's work forced a complete paradigm shift. He argued that this device could not be a one-off miracle. Its sophistication implied a lost history of Greek mechanical engineering, a tradition of geared devices that simply did not survive in the archaeological record. The ancient Greeks, he insisted, had been on a technological path that was interrupted and forgotten. The mechanism was not an anomaly, it was a survivor, a single glimpse into a world of knowledge we thought impossible. Price had revealed the machine's beating heart of gears, but its mind, its instructions and purpose were still written in a language no one could fully read. The inscriptions were there, thousands of tiny Greek letters, each smaller than a millimeter in height, but 2 millennia under the sea had rendered them ghostly shadows, worn away or hidden beneath thick mineral crusts. For a century, scholars squinted at the fragments, filling notebooks with frustratingly incomplete transcriptions. They could catch a word here, a number there, but the full text, the mechanism's own voice, remained stubbornly silent. The breakthrough came not from a lone scholar with a magnifying glass, but from a technological alliance. A team of researchers brought the fragments to a laboratory in England and subjected them to the most advanced three-dimensional imaging tools on the planet. They used a technique called microfocus X-ray computed tomography, the same technology used for medical scans, to peer inside the corroded blocks without damaging them. They also employed polynomial texture mapping, a method that uses multiple light sources to photograph a surface from every possible angle, revealing textures and indentations invisible to the naked eye. The results were nothing short of miraculous. Letters that had been completely illegible suddenly swam into focus. Faint scratches in the bronze were amplified into clear, readable text. It was as if someone had wiped the grime from a 2,000-year-old window, and for the first time we could read the user's manual. And that is precisely what these inscriptions were, a detailed guide etched onto the plates and casing of the device itself. They labeled the dials and explained their functions. Key terms emerged from the digital haze, the Greek names for the 5 known planets: Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mercury. There were the signs of the zodiac marking the sun's path through the sky. Most tellingly, there were extensive references to eclipses, with notations predicting whether an eclipse would be solar or lunar, and even the color and direction of the shadow, information steeped in ancient astrological tradition. This was the final, definitive proof of the mechanism's purpose. It was not a toy or a philosophical model. It was a practical, predictive instrument. The inscriptions connected the cold mechanics of the gears to the living, breathing beliefs of the ancient world. They showed that turning the crank was not just about calculating positions. It was about foreseeing celestial events that were believed to hold profound meaning for kings, cities, and harvests. The machine could tell you not only when the moon would eclipse the sun, but what that eclipse might portend. The silent bronze had finally found its voice, and it was speaking of power, prophecy, and the human desire to find order in the stars. With its voice finally deciphered, the mechanism revealed its primary purpose: to act as a portable cosmos. This was an orrery, a mechanical model of the solar system, but one built with a complexity that would not be matched for over 1,000 years. At its heart, it solved a beautiful and difficult problem: how to turn the messy, irregular movements of the heavens into the smooth, predictable turn of a bronze gear. The front face was a masterpiece of condensed information. A large central dial displayed 2 concentric rings. The outer ring showed the 365 days of the Egyptian calendar, a simple and reliable system the Greeks used for astronomical calculations. Nestled inside it was the ring of the zodiac, the 12 constellations that form the sun's apparent path through the year. A pointer, likely representing the sun, would move around this dial, showing both the date and the sun's position in the zodiac simultaneously. But the sun was just the beginning. Another pointer tracked the moon, not only its position but its phase, a tiny, rotating ball perhaps half white and half black showing the lunar cycle in real time. Then came the true test of engineering, the 5 wandering stars, the planets. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn do not move at constant speeds or in simple circles against the backdrop of stars. They slow down, speed up, and even appear to loop backwards in retrograde motion. To simulate this with gears alone seems an impossible task, yet the Greeks had a mathematical model for these motions, developed by astronomers like Hipparchus, and the mechanism's builders found a way to mechanize it. They used ingenious gear trains, combinations of wheels with different numbers of teeth, to create the correct ratios of motion. For the moon's variable speed, they employed a brilliant pin and slot device, a kind of mechanical cam that made the moon pointer speed up and slow down as it traveled. Turning the single-hand crank on the side set this entire miniature universe into synchronized motion. You could spin it forward to see where Mars would be next month, or backward to check where Venus was during a historic battle. It was a cosmic calculator allowing you to input a date and read out the sky. This was not magic, it was mechanical genius, a physical embodiment of Greek mathematical astronomy made from bronze and ambition. To hold it was to hold a working theory of the universe in your hands. But the moon was the mechanism's true masterpiece. Of all the celestial bodies it modeled, the builders lavished their most ingenious engineering on our closest neighbor. The ancient Greeks knew something modern stargazers confirm: the moon is a fickle traveler. It does not orbit Earth in a perfect circle at a steady pace. Its path is elliptical, meaning its distance from us changes. When it is closer, it appears to move faster against the stars. When farther, it slows down. This irregular rhythm, called the lunar anomaly, posed a profound mechanical challenge. How do you make a single, steadily turning gear produce a pointer that speeds up and slows down in a precise, repeating pattern? The solution, etched into the bronze, is breathtaking in its elegance. On one of the main gear wheels, they mounted a small pin. This pin did not sit at the center, but off to the side. It poked up through a long, narrow slot cut into a second gear placed directly above it. As the first gear turned at a constant rate, the pin engaged the slot, dragging the second gear along. But because the pin was off-center, its engagement point in the slot shifted with each rotation. Think of it like a bicycle pedal. When your foot is at the top of the stroke, you have little leverage to push forward, but as it sweeps down, you gain power. This pin and slot device created a similar, gentle push and pull. It transformed a smooth, circular motion into a subtle, back and forth rocking, a sinusoidal variation that made the moon pointer accelerate and decelerate in perfect sync with the real moon's journey. The precision is staggering. This single, clever assembly reproduced a complex astronomical cycle that takes the moon about 9 years to complete. It proves the builders were not just tinkerers, they were mathematical astronomers, likely working from the theories of the great Hipparchus of Rhodes, who had calculated the moon's anomalous motion a century before the ship sank. This was not guesswork, it was calculated engineering. And to crown this lunar achievement, the mechanism likely displayed the moon's changing face. A small, spherical pointer, perhaps made of silver and black stone, would have rotated on an axis, showing the exact phase from a gleaming sliver of a new crescent to the full, radiant orb and back into darkness. To witness this 2,000-year-old machine perform its silent ballet, accurately modeling the moon's dance with a few pieces of clever bronze, is to understand that the gap between their genius and ours is not one of intellect but merely of time. This cosmic clockwork had one final, spectacular trick, a power that was both scientific and sacred. On the back of the mechanism, researchers found 2 large spiral dials, and the lower one held the key to predicting one of nature's most awe-inspiring events, eclipses. This was not a simple calendar of dates, it was a map of celestial shadows stretching decades into the future. The dial tracked a complex astronomical rhythm called the saros-cycle. Picture the sun, the earth, and the moon in a cosmic line. For an eclipse to happen, the moon must be at a new moon for a solar eclipse or a full moon for a lunar eclipse, and it must also be crossing the plane of Earth's orbit. This precise alignment repeats in a predictable pattern every 223 lunar months, roughly 18 years and 11 days. The builders of the mechanism encoded this entire 18-year cycle onto a single, elegant spiral. A pointer would crawl along this coiled track, and at specific points, tiny inscriptions next to the dial came alive with meaning. These were not just marks, they were detailed predictions. Each glyph, a small symbol, told a story. It indicated whether the coming eclipse would be solar or lunar. It gave the predicted hour of the event. Most astonishingly, some even suggested the expected color of the eclipse, words like a dark or blood red, details that spoke to deep observational records passed down through generations. This machine could tell you not only that an eclipse would darken the sky on a certain day in 15 years, but what kind of shadow to expect. For even greater long-term accuracy, they added a smaller, subsidiary dial called the exeligmos. This tracked a triple saros-cycle, 54 years and 1 month, effectively resetting the prediction to account for that extra third of a day that accumulates each saros-cycle. It was a correction for celestial drift, ensuring the mechanism's predictions remained pin-sharp across a human lifetime. To us, this is a marvel of computation. To an ancient Greek or Roman, it was something closer to prophecy. Eclipses were profound omens, events that could shake empires and alter the fates of kings. The ability to predict them was not just academic, it was a source of immense political and religious power. A ruler who could foretell the moon swallowing the sun could claim divine favor or prepare his people to avoid panic. This bronze machine, therefore, was likely more than a philosopher's tool. It was an instrument of state, a way to regulate calendars, plan religious festivals, and demonstrate mastery over the terrifying beauty of the cosmos. It turned the chaotic fear of a darkened sky into a scheduled entry on a bronze dial, and in doing so, it offered the ultimate illusion, control over time itself. Yet this cosmic calculator had one dial that pointed not to the stars, but directly to the heart of Greek culture. On the lower back of the mechanism, nestled beside the eclipse predictor, researchers found a smaller, 4-year dial with a simple but baffling inscription. It was labeled with the names of famous athletic festivals, the Olympics, the Nah Games at Dodona, the Isthmia at Corinth, and the Pythia at Delphi. This was the Olympiad dial, a direct link between the gears of heaven and the dust of the stadium. For the ancient Greeks, time was not just measured in days and moons, but in 4-year cycles called Olympiads, the period between each Olympic Games. This dial synchronized the mechanism's celestial calendar with that sacred human rhythm. As you turned the crank, a pointer would move around this dial, indicating which major Panhellenic Games were scheduled for that year. It even accounted for the fact that the 4 great games were staggered, so one was held every year, with the Olympics being the crown jewel of the 4th year. But the inscriptions go deeper, listing not just the Big Four, but also smaller, local games like the Nemean Games or those held at Rhodes. This was a complete social, religious, and athletic calendar for the Greek-speaking world. What does this tell us about the person who owned or used this device? They were not merely an astronomer gazing at the sky. They were deeply embedded in the fabric of elite Greek society, likely a person of wealth, status, and mobility. This individual would need to plan long journeys across the Mediterranean, voyages that depended on favorable seasons and safe sailing windows predicted by the same machine. Knowing when the Olympics were coming was not just for booking tickets, it was essential for a participant, a sponsor, or a diplomat. An athlete needed to train and travel. A wealthy patron sending a chariot team needed to arrange logistics and funding. A city-state sending its official delegation needed to plan its political appearances and religious offerings. The mechanism provided the master schedule, aligning astronomical reality with cultural necessity. It bound together the motion of planets with the sprint of a runner, the eclipse of the moon with the opening ceremony at Olympia. This single dial transforms the device from a purely scientific instrument into a tool for social navigation. It suggests the owner moved in circles where such knowledge was power, where coordinating with the rhythms of both gods and men was the mark of a sophisticated mind. The machine did not just calculate where Venus would be, it told you when you needed to be in Illes to see the finest athletes in the world compete in her honor. But the mechanism's ambition did not stop with the sun and moon. The greatest puzzle and its most astonishing engineering feat lay in the lost gears meant to track the 5 wandering stars, the planets. Only a few mysterious, fragmented gears hint at this system, but their very existence suggests a machine of almost unimaginable sophistication. The challenge was monumental. Each planet, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, moves against the backdrop of stars at its own unique pace. Jupiter takes about 12 years to complete its circuit, Saturn around 30. But their motion is not simply a steady forward march. To an observer on Earth, each planet periodically slows, halts, and appears to trace a small, looping backwards path in the sky for weeks or months before resuming its forward journey. This is retrograde motion, a celestial illusion caused by our own moving viewpoint as we orbit the Sun. For the Greeks, this was not an illusion but a real, observed phenomenon that any model of the cosmos had to explain and replicate. How could a system of bronze gears possibly simulate this stop and loop, this dance of advance and retreat? The leading theory points to a genius solution: epicyclic gearing. Imagine a small gear called a pinion mounted not on a fixed axle but on the edge of a larger, slowly turning gear wheel. As the large gear rotates, it carries the small gear with it in a grand circle. But the small gear can also spin independently on its own axle. The tip of a pointer attached to that small gear would trace a complex looping path, a series of alternating forward arcs and tight backward curls. This is a physical model of the geometric theory proposed by the astronomer Apollonius of Perga. In his model, a planet moved on a small circle, the epicycle, whose center itself traveled along a larger circle around the Earth. When the planet on its little circle moved in the opposite direction to the big circle's rotation, from our vantage point it would appear to slow and reverse. To build this from gears required a breathtaking layering of mechanisms. Each planet would need its own dedicated gear train, a nested system of wheels within wheels, each precisely calculated to match that planet's specific periods of forward and retrograde motion. The surviving fragment D, a solitary, enigmatic gear with an off-center pin, is believed by many researchers to be part of this lost planetary system, a key component for generating those elegant celestial loops. If this interpretation is correct, then the Antikythera Mechanism was not just a computer for the Sun and Moon. It was a complete, working orrery of the known ancient cosmos, a miniature universe in a box where every wandering star obeyed its own mechanical law, dancing to a tune composed of mathematics and cast in bronze. This reconciliation of cosmic and human time was not just for games, it was a matter of survival. At its core, the Antikythera Mechanism solved one of the most persistent headaches of the ancient world: how to make different calendars agree. The front face presented a brilliant solution. Its large dial featured two primary rings. The outer ring displayed the 365-day Egyptian calendar, a straightforward, civil system that advanced 1 day per year without the fuss of leap years. Inside it rotated the zodiac ring, divided into the 12 familiar constellations. A single pointer representing the Sun moved around this combined display. With one glance, a user could see the civil date and the Sun's precise position in the sky, a direct link between the bureaucratic year and the astronomical reality. But human life was also governed by the Moon, with its 29.5-day cycle defining months and religious festivals. The mechanism tracked this separately, with a dedicated lunar pointer and phase display. The genius lay in the synchronization. By turning the crank, you could watch how these two cycles, solar and lunar, fell in and out of step. You could find the date when a specific moon phase would occur, or see how a lunar month shifted within the solar year. This was vital for planning, as many ancient societies, including the Greeks, used lunisolar calendars that required periodic intercalary months to be inserted to keep lunar festivals in roughly the same solar season. The mechanism could visually demonstrate when that correction was needed. The device likely offered a third layer of timekeeping, one etched not on a dial but on the outer casing. Researchers believe it featured a parapegma, a kind of star calendar. This would have been a list of key annual events, each tied to the helical rising or setting of a specific star, meaning its first appearance in the dawn sky after a period of invisibility. These celestial markers were the ancient world's most reliable seasonal alarms. The parapegma might have noted, for instance, that when the bright star Arcturus rises just before the sun, it is time to prune the vine. When the Pleiades cluster sets in the evening, the sailing season ends and stormy winter begins. This connected the abstract gearwork directly to the rhythm of the Earth, to planting, harvesting, and sailing. Imagine a farmer or a ship captain consulting the device. They could input the current date, see the sun's position and the moon's phase, and then reference the parapegma inscription to know what practical task the stars were signaling. It was a unified dashboard for time, blending three separate systems: the solar civil year, the lunar religious month, and the stellar agricultural season, into one coherent picture. Such synchronization was more than convenient, it was essential for the functioning of society. Religious festivals tied to lunar phases had to be announced in advance. Tax collection and rent were often based on solar seasons and harvests. Safe maritime trade depended on knowing the end of the sailing season. A city-state that let its calendar drift could find its festivals out of season, its tax demands coming before the harvest was in, and its ships lost to autumn storms. The Antikythera Mechanism, therefore, was potentially an instrument of governance. It allowed a knowledgeable user to plan, regulate, and proclaim time itself, aligning human activity with the immutable cycles of the cosmos. In a world without printed almanacs or digital reminders, this bronze computer offered a master schedule for civilization, proving that the ancient quest for knowledge was always intimately tied to the practical needs of daily life. The question of who built this marvel is a mystery written in bronze and Greek letters. The inscriptions themselves provide the first tantalizing clues, not in a signature, but in the dialect and the calendar used. The Greek lettering shows characteristics of the Doric dialect, which was spoken in regions like Corinth and its western colonies, most notably the powerhouse city of Syracuse on the island of Sicily. Furthermore, the mechanism's calendar includes references to a specific festival in Corinth, strongly hinting at a cultural connection to that part of the Greek world. This immediately points to one legendary figure whose name echoes through history: Archimedes of Syracuse. The Roman orator Cicero, writing a century after the mechanism was lost, described a device brought to Rome by the general Marcellus after sacking Syracuse. He wrote that Archimedes had constructed a globe or sphere that modeled the motions of the sun, moon, and 5 planets, a device so ingenious it showed eclipses. The description is uncannily similar. Could the Antikythera Mechanism be a descendant of Archimedes' own invention, perhaps built by his followers? While the device itself dates to decades after his death, the intellectual lineage is compelling. Yet another strong candidate emerges from the sea itself, from the likely origin of the doomed ship. Analysis of the cargo and the route suggests the vessel sailed from the eastern Mediterranean, possibly from the island of Rhodes. Rhodes was a renowned center of astronomy and engineering in the 1st century before the Common Era, home to the philosopher Posidonius and his school. Posidonius was known for building instruments and advancing the very astronomical theories the mechanism embodies. It is entirely plausible that a workshop in Rhodes, steeped in this knowledge, constructed the device for a wealthy Roman patron. The most likely answer, however, is not a single name but a tradition. An object of this complexity, with its blend of theoretical astronomy and precision craftsmanship, could not have sprung from a vacuum. It implies a school of thought, a workshop with tools and templates, and a clientele who understood and valued such things. The Antikythera Mechanism was probably not a one-off miracle, but a rare survivor from a small number of exquisite devices made for the elite. Its very existence suggests a lost chapter of ancient technology, a whisper of a world where the line between science and art was drawn in finely cut bronze gears. The wreck itself offers perhaps the strongest clues to the mechanism's origins. While the bronze computer is the most intellectually precious item recovered, the ship's hold was a treasure trove of more conventional luxury. Divers brought up stunning bronze statues, their forms still fluid and powerful after 2 millennia underwater. They recovered marble sculptures, delicate glass bowls that shimmered like captured bubbles, gold jewelry, and even the skeletal remains of the passengers themselves. This was not a typical merchant vessel carrying grain or pottery. This was a floating gallery, a Roman luxury liner transporting the finest spoils of the Greek world back to Italy. The cargo paints a vivid picture of a wealthy Roman aristocrat, perhaps a general or a governor, who had systematically collected the most beautiful and impressive artworks from the cities under his control. He was bringing home trophies to decorate his villa and demonstrate his cultured taste, a common practice as Rome's conquest of Greece intensified. Among these trophies of war and wealth, the Antikythera Mechanism was likely the ultimate conversation piece, a demonstration not just of plundered art but of plundered knowledge. But where did this specific piece of knowledge come from? The answer may lie in the most humble objects found on the wreck, the clay jars. Scattered across the site were the remains of large ceramic storage containers called amphorae, used for transporting wine, oil, or grain. Many of these bore stamps identifying them as coming from the island of Rhodes. Furthermore, coins recovered from the wreck were minted in Pergamon, a city in Asia Minor, and date firmly to between 70 and 60 years before the Common Era. This narrows the ship's final voyage to a very specific window. Rhodes was not just a random stop. In the 1st century before the Common Era, it was a bustling commercial hub, and more importantly, a renowned center of astronomy and advanced engineering. It was the home of the philosopher Posidonius and his famous school, where the very astronomical theories that powered the mechanism were actively studied and taught. The convergence of evidence is compelling. A ship loaded with Rhodian goods, carrying an incredibly sophisticated astronomical computer, sinking during the precise period when Rhodes was a hotbed for such devices. The most logical scenario is that the mechanism was either crafted in a Rhodian workshop or acquired there by the Roman collector. It was then carefully packed alongside statues and silks, destined for a powerful man in Rome who would marvel at its turning gears. The ship never made it. A sudden storm, perhaps, or a navigational error drove it against the cliffs of Antikythera. The treasures of a lifetime, both beautiful and brilliant, sank into the silent dark where the mechanism's gears would remain frozen, holding their celestial secret for 2,000 years. Its journey was cut short, but its very presence on that specific ship gives us a probable birthplace and turns the mechanism from a timeless mystery into a tangible product of a specific time, place, and brilliant lost tradition. The mechanism's sophistication forces a difficult question. Was it a lone technological wolf, a singular stroke of genius in a world of simple machines? To answer that, we must look at what else the ancient Greeks were building. They were, in fact, remarkable engineers. We know of the intricate water clock of Ctesibius in Alexandria, a device that used a regulated flow of water to mark hours, even with moving figurines and sound. We have the writings of Hero of Alexandria, who described a steam-powered toy called an eolipile, a spinning sphere that demonstrated the principle of jet propulsion. These were brilliant inventions, yet they serve a different purpose. The water clock was a timekeeper, the steam engine a fascinating demonstration. They were proofs of concept, wonderful and clever, but not computers. The Antikythera Mechanism stands apart. It was not a demonstration of a single principle like steam power or hydraulic force. It was a precision instrument for integrated calculation, a machine whose sole purpose was to process astronomical data through an intricate web of interdependent gears. The difference is one of intent and complexity. Think of it as the gap between building a single, beautiful clock and constructing a mechanical factory where dozens of synchronized machines work together to produce a specific mathematical result. This level of integration required more than a bright idea. It demanded a workshop tradition of extraordinary skill. The bronze used was a specific alloy, likely leaded tin bronze, chosen for its durability and ease of casting fine details. The gear teeth were not crude notches, they were precisely cut triangles with some wheels possessing over 200 teeth, each spaced with a consistency that suggests the use of a dividing plate, a tool for marking out equal intervals. This is precision machining on a millimeter scale, a craft far beyond simple blacksmithing. Then there is the miniaturization, packing over 30 interlocking gears into a case the size of a shoebox, a feat of compact design that would not be seen again until the finest European clockwork of the 18th century. So where are all the other examples? Why is this the only one? The likely answer is a tragic combination of perishability and history. Bronze was valuable, and when the sophisticated Hellenistic world that created this knowledge began to fracture under Roman conquest and internal strife, the specialized workshops that built such devices likely vanished. In times of crisis or cultural shift, practical tools for farming or warfare survive. Philosophical texts might be copied and preserved, but a fragile, complex astronomical calculator, understood by only a few, would be among the first wonders to be melted down for scrap or simply forgotten. The Antikythera Mechanism survived only by accident, lost at sea where no one could reclaim its bronze. It is not an isolated miracle, but a rare and precious survivor, a single glittering shard that hints at a whole lost world of ancient high technology, a tradition that flickered brightly and then was extinguished, leaving this one device to tell the tale. For a century, the mechanism's deepest secrets remained locked inside its calcified shell. Then, in 2005, a new team formed with a simple, revolutionary goal to see everything. This was the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project, a global collaboration of archaeologists, physicists, and engineers who brought 21st century eyes to a 2,000-year-old artifact. Their first task was to look without touching. They transported the fragile fragments from Athens to a specialized laboratory where they were placed inside a giant humming machine. This was a three-dimensional X-ray microtomography scanner, a device that works like a medical CT scanner but with a beam fine enough to see the edge of a razor. It took thousands of thin, virtual slices through the corroded bronze, building a perfect digital model of the internal structure, gear by hidden gear. For the first time, researchers could rotate the entire mechanism in three-dimensional space on a computer screen, peering between layers of metal and rock to trace the ghostly outlines of gears that had never been seen. They could count teeth with absolute certainty, measure the angles of engagement, and follow the paths of axles that had long since dissolved. But seeing the bones was not enough, they needed to read the skin. To capture the surface inscriptions, they used a technique called polynomial texture mapping. They surrounded a fragment with a dome of 76 individual lights, taking hundreds of photographs, each with light striking from a different angle. Sophisticated software then combined these images, allowing researchers to virtually move the light across the surface in any direction. Faint scratches in the bronze, shadows of letters worn away to near nothingness, suddenly popped into stark relief. It was like reading by the light of a low sun, where every tiny ridge and valley casts a long shadow. With these two technologies working in concert, the mechanism began to give up its final secrets. They discovered previously unknown gears, bringing the total count to at least 30. They read hundreds of new characters from the instruction manual, confirming the planetary displays and detailing the eclipse predictions with startling specificity. Most importantly, they could now see how the gears physically connected, solving mechanical puzzles that had plagued researchers for decades. This data did not just live on screens, it became the blueprint for physical reconstruction. Engineers used the precise three-dimensional scans to laser-cut exact replicas of the gear wheels from modern bronze. They assembled them into working models that turned with a satisfying, meshing click, proving that the theoretical gear trains actually functioned as intended. For the first time in 2 millennia, the celestial dance programmed into this ancient computer was performed again, not by shadows and guesses, but by the clear, turning proof of accurate gears. This was not the work of a lone genius in a study, but a symphony of modern disciplines, from advanced particle physics to classic philology, all harmonizing to finally hear the full, intricate song of a lost technology. These digital blueprints demanded a physical form. The first person to attempt a full reconstruction was Derek-de-Solla-Price himself. Working from his painstaking X-ray analysis, he and a Greek watchmaker built a model in the 1970s. It was a landmark proof of concept, a clunky but functional assembly of brass plates and gears that turned and displayed the basic cycles. It validated his theory that the device was a computer, but it was also incomplete, missing the complex planetary displays and the subtlety of the lunar mechanism. The next great leap came from an unconventional source, Michael Wright, a curator of mechanical engineering at the Science Museum in London. He approached the puzzle not just as a historian, but as a master craftsman. He spent decades meticulously measuring the original fragments, often creating his own tools to probe their secrets. His breakthrough was a new interpretation of the front dial, suggesting it had a complex array of pointers for the planets. Wright then did what no one had done for 2,000 years. He built a fully functional, precision model of the mechanism as he believed it worked, using techniques the ancient Greeks would have recognized. He cast his own bronze gears, cutting each triangular tooth by hand with a file, a process of immense patience. His replica was not a theory on paper, it was a ticking, turning artifact. When you turn the crank on Wright's model, the entire ancient cosmos comes to life, pointers sweeping across dials in a silent, elegant dance. It proved the mechanical principles were sound, but the question of the exact planetary system remained open. The most recent and ambitious reconstruction emerged in 2021 from a team at University College London. They started from a single, tantalizing clue, a cryptic passage in the inscriptions that describe the cycles of Venus and Saturn. Using this as a mathematical constraint, they reverse-engineered a possible gear train for all 5 planets that could fit within the known dimensions of the wooden case. Their solution is a masterpiece of minimalist engineering, a nested system of epicyclic gears that creates the characteristic loops of retrograde motion with stunning efficiency. They then built a physical model from laser-cut bronze, a device that fits in the palm of your hand yet contains dozens of interlocking wheels. To watch their model operate is to see the final piece of the puzzle click into place. The Sun, the Moon, and all 5 planets move in synchronized harmony, their dance dictated by bronze. These replicas, from Price's first attempt to the UCL team's elegant planetary solution, do more than prove a point, they bridge the centuries. They transform abstract calculations and faded inscriptions into something you can see and hear, the gentle whir of precision gears turning under human power. They make the genius of the ancient workshop tangible, allowing us to witness the lost wonder of a universe in a box, reborn in metal and motion. But why go to such extraordinary lengths? Predicting eclipses and tracking planets was not merely an academic exercise in the ancient world. This machine served a deeper, more urgent human need to find meaning and exert control in a cosmos that seemed both beautiful and capricious. Its most immediate practical application was almost certainly astrology, specifically the casting of horoscopes. For a Greek or Roman astrologer, the exact position of the moon, the sun, and all 5 planets at the moment of a person's birth was the essential data for mapping their fate. Calculating those positions for a specific date in the past was a laborious, day-long task of complex mathematics. The Antikythera Mechanism could do it in a single turn of a crank. Imagine an astrologer consulting for a wealthy patron born 40 years prior. Instead of consulting tables and performing tedious calculations, the astrologer could simply set the dial to the patron's birth date and read off the celestial configuration directly from the pointers. It transformed an elite, scholarly art into a more efficient and perhaps more marketable service. This was a horoscope machine, a powerful tool for those who traded in destiny. Yet its purpose was also profoundly educational. The great cosmological debates of the time were not just abstract, they were about the fundamental structure of reality. Was the Earth at the center of the universe, as Aristotle taught, or did the sun hold that place, as Aristarchus of Samos had daringly proposed? The mechanism, with its gears modeling the observed motions from an Earth-centered perspective, was a powerful teaching aid. It physically demonstrated the prevailing mathematical theories of thinkers like Hipparchus, making the complex cycles of epicycles and eccentrics visible and tangible. A student or philosopher could turn the handle and watch the theory come to life, seeing how the geometric models translated into real motion. In this sense, it was a three-dimensional textbook, a working proof of Greek astronomical science. Its role extended into the sacred sphere as well. The precise timing of religious festivals was crucial, and many were tied to lunar phases or solar positions. A temple priest could use the mechanism to determine the correct day for the Thesmophoria, or to announce the beginning of the Olympic truce based on the celestial calendar. It served as an authoritative regulator of sacred time, ensuring rituals were performed when the gods were most attentive. But perhaps the most compelling reason for its existence lies in the Greek concept of techne, the marriage of supreme skill, art, and technical knowledge. This device was the ultimate expression of techne. It showcased a total mastery not only over bronze and craftsmanship but over the cosmos itself. Owning such an object was a declaration of power and sophistication. For a wealthy Roman aristocrat, it was the pinnacle of collected luxury, more impressive than any statue because it contained active genius. For a city-state or a major temple, displaying it would be a testament to their cultural and intellectual supremacy. It was a conversation piece that whispered, "We do not just observe the heavens, we have captured their laws in bronze." So the mechanism was never just one thing. It was a practical tool for astrologers, a dynamic model for philosophers, a sacred calendar for priests, and a dazzling trophy for the elite. It satisfied the human hunger for prediction, understanding, ritual, and status all at once. In its whirring gears, we see the ancient world's deepest ambitions crystallized, the desire to hold the logic of the universe in your hands and to show everyone that you could. The inscriptions are more than a manual, they are the creator's own voice, etched in metal for eternity. One of the most evocative phrases appears on the back cover. It describes the device as a spherion, a little sphere or globe. This single word is a powerful echo of the literary tradition, a direct link to Cicero's description of Archimedes' sphere. It tells us the builders themselves thought of their creation not just as a machine, but as a model of the cosmos, a handheld universe. Another crucial label clarifies the dual calendar system on the main dial. It explicitly states Aegyptoi, Egyptian, for the outer ring of 365 days, and Zodiakos, zodiac, for the inner ring of constellations. This was a bilingual timekeeper, translating between the reliable, administrative time of Egypt and the celestial, seasonal time of the Greek heavens. It was built for an international user, someone who moved between cultures and needed both systems at their fingertips. But the most haunting words are found next to the eclipse dial. Here, the glyphs are not just symbols, they are tiny stories. Next to specific eclipse predictions, the scribe added descriptive terms. One reads eruthros, meaning red or blood red. Another says skythros, a word for gloomy or dark. These are not abstract calculations, they are records of lived experience. They suggest that generations of astronomers had watched the sky and noted that during a total lunar eclipse, the moon could turn a deep, coppery red as sunlight filtered through Earth's atmosphere, or it could fade into an ashen, dark gray depending on atmospheric conditions like volcanic dust. The mechanism's builders encoded these observational details into the bronze, transforming a simple prediction of when into a richer forecast of what it might look like. This transforms the device from a cold calculator into a repository of collective human observation. It connects the gear work to the eyes of ancient sky watchers who stood on temple steps, recording the color of the shadow with a poet's vocabulary. They passed these notes down, and a craftsman, centuries later, meticulously engraved them next to the appropriate gear-driven prediction. When you read these words, blood red, dark, you are not just reading an instruction, you are witnessing a moment of awe frozen in time and metal, a direct transmission from a human being who looked up 2,000 years ago, saw the moon swallowed in a terrifying hue, and wrote it down so the machine would remember. That single word, blood red, is a whisper across 2,000 years. It reminds us that this was not just a machine of logic, but a vessel for human wonder. And that is the true legacy of the Antikythera Mechanism. It forces us to rewrite a chapter of history we thought we knew. For centuries, the narrative of ancient Greek genius was one of pure thought, of philosophers in togas contemplating abstract geometry and perfect forms under the open sky. They were thinkers, not tinkerers. The Antikythera Mechanism shatters that comfortable myth completely. Here is the physical proof that they were also supreme engineers, master craftsmen who could translate their celestial mathematics into a working, physical reality. They moved from theory on a papyrus scroll to precision gear cutting in a workshop. This device bridges the gap between the mind of Aristotle and the hand of a master bronze smith, proving these were not separate worlds but parts of a single, sophisticated culture. Its implications for the history of technology are staggering. Before its discovery, the pinnacle of ancient mechanical complexity was something like a water clock or a simple geared mill. The next time we see anything approaching this level of intricate, miniaturized gearwork is in the great astronomical clocks of medieval Europe, like the one built in Prague in the 1400s. The Antikythera Mechanism pushes that entire timeline back by over 1,000 years. It means the seeds of the mechanical age, the very concept of a complex machine processing information, were planted not in the Renaissance but in the Hellenistic era. We have to confront the possibility that this was not even the peak but merely a sample of what was possible. What other devices, now lost to time, might have graced the libraries of Alexandria or the studies of wealthy patrons? The mechanism suggests a parallel path of technological development, one that valued intricate simulation and calculation, a path that was tragically cut short. That interruption is one of history's great silences. The decline of the Hellenistic world absorbed into the Roman Empire, followed by political fragmentation, economic shifts, and the eventual burning of libraries like Alexandria, created a perfect storm of forgetting. The specialized knowledge required to design and build such a device, the workshop traditions, the mathematical blueprints, they were not passed down. The Romans, while brilliant administrators and builders, seemed more interested in the mechanism as a dazzling trophy than in continuing the scientific tradition that created it. They admired the gadget but did not necessarily foster the ecosystem of thought that produced it. Practical technologies for construction, warfare, and agriculture survived and evolved, but this branch of high-precision scientific instrument making appears to have withered. The knowledge simply faded away like a complex song remembered by only one person who then takes it to the grave. So this corroded lump of bronze is more than an artifact, it is a ghost of a lost future. It asks us a haunting question: what if that tradition of geared computation had continued unbroken? What if the notebooks of Archimedes or the workshops of Rhodes had been preserved and built upon? Might the scientific revolution have happened centuries earlier? We can never know, but the mechanism's very existence is a powerful corrective to a linear, progressive view of history. It shows that advanced technological sophistication is not a guaranteed forward march. It can bloom in specific times and places, fueled by a unique blend of curiosity, patronage, and craft, and it can be utterly lost, leaving behind only a single cryptic clue in a shipwreck. The Antikythera Mechanism is that clue. It stands as a monument not to what the ancient Greeks knew, but to the profound depths of what they could do, a silent, ticking reminder that our ancestors were far closer to us in ambition and ingenuity than we ever dared to dream. Yet for all we have learned, the mechanism still guards its final secrets. A handful of fragments labeled with letters like D and F sit in their museum trays as silent, stubborn enigmas. These are pieces of the puzzle that simply do not fit into any of our current reconstructions. They bear traces of gearing or inscriptions that hint at functions we have not yet imagined. The most famous of these is Fragment D, a solitary, complex gear with an off-center pin and a strange, four-sided arbor hole. Experts have proposed it might be part of the lost planetary system, perhaps a critical component for modeling Mercury's tricky orbit. But without the surrounding gears it once meshed with, its true purpose remains a tantalizing guess. Then there is the question of the case itself. Was the front face we see truly the only display? Could there have been additional, smaller dials on the sides, now completely lost, that showed other cycles or information? The wooden case was largely eaten away by worms, leaving only hollow impressions in the corrosion. What other delicate pointers or ivory inlays vanished with it? Even the planetary display, which teams have so brilliantly reverse-engineered, is still a theoretical reconstruction. The inscriptions confirm the planets were there, and the gear trains proposed are mechanically sound, but we have no surviving gears that definitively prove their exact arrangement. The elegant solution for Venus and Saturn is a masterpiece of modern deduction, but it is ultimately a best guess based on the clues left behind. This incompleteness is not a failure of science, it is the nature of the artifact itself. We are trying to reconstruct a 2,000-year-old ghost from a few scattered bones. The shipwreck may still hold answers. Recent excavations at the Antikythera site have revealed that much of the wreck remains buried, and new fragments of the mechanism itself have been recovered from the seabed. Each fleck of corroded bronze could be the key that finally locks Fragment D into place, or reveals a dial we never knew existed. The story is not over. The mechanism's enduring fascination lies precisely in this balance between revelation and mystery. We have decoded its language and rebuilt its cosmos, yet it still withholds its full blueprint. It is a reminder that the past is never fully captured, only patiently, piece by piece, rediscovered. The gear ratios whisper a name from history. Among the brilliant minds of the ancient world, one astronomer's work aligns with the mechanism's design with uncanny precision, Hipparchus of Rhodes. Active in the 2nd century before the Common Era, Hipparchus was a revolutionary figure. He compiled the first known star catalogue, and more importantly for our story, he dedicated himself to solving the moon's puzzling behavior. He meticulously calculated the period of the lunar anomaly, the time it takes for the moon to complete its cycle of speeding up and slowing down. That period is approximately 223 days. Now look inside the mechanism. Deep within its gear train, archaeologists found a specific pairing, a gear with 223 teeth driving another with 188. The ratio produced by these two numbers is a mathematical fingerprint. It directly encodes the very cycle Hipparchus worked out. This is not a vague similarity, it is a precise mechanical translation of his theory. The pin and slot device that creates the moon's variable motion is the physical incarnation of his calculations, but Hipparchus's potential influence may reach even further. He is also credited with discovering the precession of the equinoxes. the slow, gradual wobble of Earth's axis that causes the position of the stars to shift over a vast cycle of about 26,000 years. Some researchers scrutinizing the front dial believe they see evidence for this too. The zodiac ring on the mechanism is not fixed. It could be adjusted by a small pointer, potentially to account for that slow celestial drift over centuries. If true, this would mean the mechanism's builders incorporated the most cutting-edge astronomical discovery of their age, a theory so subtle it takes generations to observe. The implications are profound. We are likely looking at a device built by engineers who are directly applying the theoretical work of the greatest astronomer of their time. The mechanism is not just a calculator, it is a three-dimensional textbook of Hipparchian astronomy. It takes his complex geometrical models, his tables of numbers, and renders them into turning bronze. This connection places the machine firmly within a specific intellectual tradition, one centered on Rhodes, an island renowned as a hub for astronomy and advanced craftsmanship in the 1st century before the Common Era. It transforms the mechanism from a mysterious artifact into a documented chapter in the history of science. We can almost picture the scene: a master craftsman in a Rhodian workshop, parchment scrolls from the library of Hipparchus's successors spread out beside him, translating lines of geometry and columns of numbers into the language of gears and dials. The machine is their collaboration across time, a conversation between theory and craft, frozen in metal for us to uncover. The genius of the mechanism lies not only in its design, but in the sheer physical mastery required to build it. This was not a device sketched on papyrus. It was a tangible object forged in a specific alloy of bronze. Analysis shows it was made primarily of copper, with about 6% tin and a small, deliberate amount of lead. This leaded tin bronze was a calculated choice. The copper and tin provided strength and a golden hue, while the lead made the molten metal flow more easily into intricate molds, allowing for the casting of those impossibly fine gear teeth without bubbles or flaws. Once cast, the real artistry began. Each gear wheel, some no larger than a modern coin, had to be finished by hand. A craftsperson would mount it on a simple lathe, likely turned by a bowstring or a foot pedal, and with a hardened steel file they would cut each individual tooth. The largest surviving gear has 223 triangular teeth, each one spaced with a consistency that deviates by less than a millimeter across the entire circumference. To achieve this, they almost certainly used a dividing plate, a circular template with precisely spaced holes around its edge. A pin would be placed in each successive hole to index the gear blank, ensuring every tooth was cut in exactly the right position. This is precision engineering on a microscopic scale, performed 2 millennia before the Industrial Revolution. Then came the text. The thousands of Greek characters forming the user manual and labels were not stamped or etched crudely. They were engraved with a berin, a sharp, chisel-like tool, by a scribe working under a magnifying lens of polished rock crystal. Each letter is a masterpiece of miniaturization, some standing less than 1.6 millimeters tall, yet perfectly formed and legible. This was a collaboration between the engineer who understood the mathematics and the virtuoso artisan whose steady hand gave the machine its voice. All of this delicate clockwork was housed in a wooden case, probably a rectangular box of sycamore or cedar, with beautifully fitted doors on the front and back to protect the dials. The case itself was a work of fine cabinet making with dovetailed joints and perhaps decorative inlays. Holes in the surviving bronze plates show where it was mounted with pins, and a single, now missing hand crank on the side would have been the sole point of human interaction. To stand in that ancient workshop would be to witness a symphony of specialized skills, the metallurgist mixing the alloy, the founder pouring the molten bronze, the gear cutter filing each tooth with infinite patience, and the engraver bending close to inscribe the wisdom of the ages. The Antikythera Mechanism, therefore, is not just an intellectual triumph, it is a monument to the human hand. It reminds us that behind every great idea is the craft to make it real, the countless hours of focused labor by nameless artisans who turned cosmic theory into a ticking, turning treasure. That journey from a forgotten shipwreck to a modern icon was a slow burn. For decades, the Antikythera Mechanism remained a fascinating footnote, known mainly to historians of science and dedicated archaeology enthusiasts. It was a secret whispered in academic halls, but as its story unraveled, so too did its reach, spilling out of journals and into the broader currents of popular culture. It began with documentaries where high-definition cameras could finally do justice to its intricate gears. Programs on major networks brought the device into living rooms, presenting it not as a dry artifact, but as a genuine historical shock, a plot twist in the story of human innovation. Narrators spoke in tones of awe, and computer animations brought the lost gears to life, allowing millions to witness its celestial dance for the first time. This visual storytelling was key. It transformed abstract concepts into a spectacle of ancient genius. The mechanism's natural home, however, seemed to be in fiction, where its aura of mystery could fuel entire narratives. It became a coveted treasure in adventure novels, a cryptic puzzle in thrillers like the Antikythera Codex. Authors were drawn to its dual nature, a real object with unrealized potential. In these stories, it is often more than a calculator. It is a map to lost cities, a key to forgotten powers, or a message from a more advanced civilization. This fictional leap makes perfect sense. The mechanism represents a tangible blank space on the map of history, and storytellers love to fill those spaces with wonder. Its very existence asks the question fiction thrives on. What else did they know that we have forgotten? This cultural footprint expanded powerfully into interactive media. In the video game Assassin's Creed Odyssey, players can actually find and interact with a beautifully rendered model of the device. Set in ancient Greece, the game integrates the mechanism into its lore, suggesting it was studied by the brilliant inventor Pythagoras and holds connections to mysterious precursor civilizations. For a player, this is not a lecture, it is an experience. You can virtually hold this ancient computer, examine its gears, and feel the weight of its mystery as part of your own adventure. This interactive encounter does something profound. It personalizes the wonder. The player is not a passive observer, they are an active participant in the mystery, which makes the real history behind it all the more compelling. Beyond specific appearances, the Antikythera Mechanism has solidified into a powerful symbol. It now stands for the idea of lost golden ages and suppressed knowledge. In a world saturated with technology, it serves as a haunting reminder that progress is not a straight line, that advanced understanding can be erased by time, war, or simple neglect. It taps into a deep cultural fascination with single artifacts that change everything, like the Rosetta Stone or the Dead Sea Scrolls. The mechanism is our ultimate what-if artifact. It represents the road not taken in the history of technology, and that concept is irresistibly fertile ground for the imagination. You have likely encountered its silhouette in a documentary preview, seen its gears on a book cover, or heard its name in a conversation about ancient mysteries. That journey from a museum drawer to a cultural touchstone proves its power. The Antikythera Mechanism is no longer just an object of study. It has become a character in our modern mythos, a bronze and gear embodiment of humanity's endless curiosity about its own hidden past. The true power of the mechanism may lie not in its gears but in its metal. One of the most promising frontiers of research involves a technique called lead isotope analysis. Every source of lead ore on Earth has a unique chemical fingerprint, a specific ratio of different lead isotopes formed over billions of years. When scientists analyze the tiny amount of lead in the mechanism's bronze alloy, they can compare that fingerprint to known ancient mines across the Mediterranean. This could trace the raw material to a specific region, perhaps even a single mining district. If the lead matches ores from, say, the Lavrian mines near Athens or a source in the Peloponnese, it would point strongly to a workshop in mainland Greece. A match to Cypriot or Anatolian ores might suggest an Eastern origin. It is a form of archaeological forensics, using the very atoms of the object to discover where it was born. This scientific sleuthing could finally settle the long-standing debate between Rhodes, Corinth, Syracuse, or another center, giving us a probable birthplace written in the language of elemental decay. Beyond the metal, there are still words waiting to be found. Current imaging has revealed perhaps 95% of the surviving text, but the final 5% holds the potential for the greatest surprises. The inscriptions are layered, with later notes sometimes engraved over earlier ones, creating a palimpsest in bronze. Future technologies, perhaps using terahertz radiation or even more sensitive particle beams, might peer into these deepest layers. Could there be a designer's signature hidden beneath a calibration mark, or a line of poetry, a dedication to a patron, or a reference to a specific event that dates the construction with pinpoint accuracy? Each new character recovered is a direct message from the maker, and the last few dozen could change the entire narrative. Then there is the haunting possibility of siblings. The Antikythera Mechanism is too sophisticated to be a one-off experiment. It implies a tradition. So where are the others? Scholars now believe that fragments of similar devices may already be sitting in museum storage rooms around the world, mislabeled as corroded clockwork or unidentifiable lumps of bronze. A research project is underway to systematically scan such forgotten artifacts with modern imaging, looking for the telltale signs of precision gearing beneath the corrosion. A single new fragment, even a solitary gear from a different source, would be a revolution. It would prove the mechanism was not a lonely miracle, but part of a genre of ancient technology. It would give us a second data point, allowing us to compare designs and see an evolution of ideas. The story of the Antikythera Mechanism is far from over. It is a conversation across millennia that continues today, fueled by a new generation of researchers who are part historian, part engineer, and part detective. They are driven by the conviction that this device has not yet finished speaking. With every advance in imaging, every new scrap of text decoded, and every overlooked artifact re-examined, we get closer to hearing its full story. This ancient computer, rescued from a shipwreck by sponge divers, now challenges us to keep diving deeper into our own past. Its silent, intricate gears continue to turn, not in bronze, but in the minds of those who seek to understand them, ensuring that this 2,000-year-old wonder remains a living, evolving discovery. From a corroded lump of bronze to a cosmic calculator, the journey to understand this device has been a century-long conversation with the past. We began with a storm-tossed diver and a shipwreck laden with statues, only to discover that the most valuable treasure was not a work of art but a work of genius. Through painstaking X-rays and brilliant deduction, we peeled back the layers of corrosion and time to reveal a machine of breathtaking ambition. It calculated the dance of the sun and moon, predicted eclipses with colored shadows, and modeled the wandering paths of planets with gears that performed celestial mathematics. This was not a philosopher's toy, it was a sophisticated analog computer, a definitive product of the Hellenistic world's golden age of science. The Antikythera Mechanism forces us to rewrite a quiet chapter of history. It proves that 2,000 years ago, in workshops we can only imagine, master craftsmen and mathematical astronomers collaborated to build miniature universes in bronze. Theirs was a world capable of high-precision engineering and complex information processing, a technological peak that would not be seen again for over a millennium. This single survivor from a sunken ship is our clearest window into that lost prowess, a silent witness to a level of ingenuity that history books had simply forgotten. So what does this ancient computer ultimately tell us? It is a powerful reminder that the past is never a simple, linear story of progress from primitive to advanced. Great leaps of knowledge can be made, celebrated, and then tragically lost to the upheavals of time. The mechanism stands as a monument to human curiosity and skill, a challenge to our assumptions about our ancestors. They were not so different from us in their drive to understand the cosmos and to build machines that could make sense of its beauty. They looked at the same stars with the same wonder, and with tools of bronze and brilliance, they built a computer to hold them. If this single device survived against all odds, what other marvels have vanished without a trace? The story of the Antikythera Mechanism is a humbling and exhilarating lesson that history is always full of surprises, waiting for us to look a little closer, to ask new questions, and to rediscover the profound ingenuity of those who came before. What do you think is the most astonishing thing about this ancient computer? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into a historical mystery, subscribe for more explorations into the forgotten wonders of our past.